Welcome to the darkest room in the city. It's 10 p.m. on December 31st. While the rest of the world is pouring cheap champagne and making promises they'll break by Tuesday, you're sitting in a high-back ergonomic chair that's seen more sweat than a gym floor, staring at 6 monitors that are about to become a literal map of human failure. You're a 911 dispatcher. You're the ghost in the machine, the disembodied voice that stands between a frantic caller and the grave. But tonight isn't just any night. Tonight is New Year's Eve. In the world of emergency services, we don't call it a holiday. We call it the Night of the Long Knives. It's the Super Bowl of bad decisions. Look at your desk. You've got a venti black coffee that's mostly caffeine and spite, a half-eaten protein bar, and a headset that's already chirping. That chirp is the sound of the CAD, computer-aided dispatch system, telling you that the first wave of madness has arrived. You see, the average person thinks the ball drops at midnight. For us, the ball dropped 4 hours ago when the sun went down. Your ANI-ALI screen, that stands for Automatic Number Identification and Automatic Location Identification, for those of you who haven't been initiated into this hell, is already flashing red. The first call comes in. It's a 10:52, a man down. He's passed out in a snowbank outside a bar. He's not a victim, he's just a guy who tried to fight a bottle of tequila and lost. You dispatch a basic life support unit, or BLS, and move on. You don't have time to wonder if he freezes. You have 3 more lines ringing. This is the routine. You're a professional multitasker, which is a polite way of saying you're a professional juggler of tragedies. You're listening to a woman scream about her husband's chest pain on line 1 while you're typing a description of a fleeing vehicle into the police radio on line 2 and using your foot pedal to tell a unit to go code 3, lights and sirens, to a domestic disturbance on line 3. Your brain is split into 4 distinct channels. If you lose focus for 10 seconds, someone stops breathing. If you stutter on the radio, a cop walks into an ambush. It's high-stakes Tetris, except the blocks are human lives, and they're falling at terminal velocity. The room is climate-controlled to a crisp 68 degrees, but you're sweating. The air smells like ozone and stale adrenaline. Every time that phone rings, your heart does a little twitch. It's called acoustic startle response. After 10 years of this, your nervous system is basically a frayed electrical wire. And the clock is ticking toward midnight. That's when the celebratory gunfire starts. In a city like Chicago or LA, New Year's Eve sounds like a war zone. People think firing a 9M into the air is a great way to welcome the new year. They forget that gravity is a thing. What goes up must come down, usually through the roof of a nursery or the skull of a grandmother sitting on her porch. You start seeing the shot spotter alerts popping up on your map, dozens of them, clusters of red dots. Is it fireworks? Is it a drive-by? You don't know, so you treat it all like a homicide in progress. Dispatch to all units. We have multiple rounds detected. North District, Sector 4. Your voice is calm. It has to be. If you sound panicked, the officers on the street will panic. You have to sound like you're ordering a pizza while the world burns down around you. That's the dispatcher voice. Low, rhythmic, and utterly devoid of emotion. It's a mask. Behind the headset, your eyes are darting, your fingers are flying across the mechanical keyboard, and you're praying that the next call isn't the one that breaks you. Because on New Year's Eve, the one is always coming.
You think you could do this? You think you could handle the pressure because you're good at Call of Duty? Think again. The path to the headset is a meat grinder, designed to chew up the weak and spit out the survivors. It starts with the CritiCall test. This isn't your average job interview. They put you in a room and force you to prove you can type 50 words per minute while listening to a recorded caller scream their address, all while a simulated radio is blaring instructions in your other ear. If you can't categorize a burglary in progress while simultaneously checking a license plate for warrants, you're out. Most people fail in the first 20 minutes. They realize their brain simply wasn't wired for this level of cognitive load. Then comes the academy. Months of staring at penal codes, medical protocols, and geography. You have to know the city better than the people who built it. You have to know which alleys are dead ends and which intersections are notorious for accidents. You memorize the EMD cards, emergency medical dispatch. These are the life-saving scripts. Is he breathing? Is he conscious? Do not move him. You learn how to give CPR instructions over the phone to a mother who is holding her blue baby. You have to be able to talk her through the chest compressions while the CAD is screaming at you that the ambulance is still 4 minutes out. That's 4 minutes of you being the only thing keeping that child alive. We call it the gap. It's the space between the incident and the arrival of help, and you own that space. But the hardest part of the training isn't the technical stuff, it's the stress inoculation. They play you tapes, real tapes. You listen to dispatchers who were on the line when an officer was shot. You listen to the sounds of a house fire while a family is trapped in a bedroom. They want to see if you'll cry. They want to see if you'll freeze. If you do, you're gone. The turnover rate for 911 dispatchers in the first year is nearly 50%. The burnout isn't a possibility, it's an inevitability. You're taught to compartmentalize. You're taught that the person on the other end of the line isn't a human being, they're a set of symptoms in a location. If you let them become a person, you're finished. You'll take them home with you. You'll see their faces in your sleep. So you develop the dark humor. You joke about the frequent flyers, the addicts and the lonely seniors who call every night just to talk. You joke about the Darwin Award winners who decide to clean their guns while they're loaded. It's a defense mechanism. It's the only way to stop the trauma from seeping into your marrow. By the time you finish your probationary period, you aren't the same person who walked in. You've lost the ability to be surprised by human cruelty. You've developed hypervigilance. You're constantly scanning for exits in restaurants. You're listening to the tone of people's voices for signs of deception. You've become a predator of information. You're ready for the floor. But no amount of training prepares you for the sheer, unadulterated chaos of a New Year's Eve shift. This is where the training ends and the survival begins. You're no longer a trainee, you're an operator, and the city is about to give you everything it's got.
11:55 p.m. The tension in the dispatch center is thick enough to choke on. The supervisors are pacing the floor. Every single station is manned. The radio traffic is a constant hum of units clearing calls just to be immediately reassigned. Then it happens. A line rings. It's a silent call. Those are the ones that make your blood run cold. You pick up, 911, where's your emergency? Nothing but heavy breathing and a faint rhythmic thumping. You check the ALI, the location. It's a high-rise apartment on the south side. You see a previous history of domestic violence at this address. You're not just a voice now, you're a detective. If you can't speak, tap the phone twice. Tap, tap. Your heart rate spikes to 120. Are you in danger? Tap, tap. Is there a weapon? Tap, tap. You're already typing the domestic, priority 1 into the CAD. You dispatch the closest units. Dispatch to 2 Alpha 12. Respond code 3 to 1422 South Main, apartment 4B. Silent call. History of 1016. Caller confirms weapon. While you're talking to the units, the background noise on the line changes. You hear a door being kicked in. You hear a man's voice slurred and filled with a terrifying, quiet rage. Who are you talking to? Give me that phone. There's a scuffle, a scream. Then the line goes dead. You try to call back. No answer. Now you're in the void. You've sent help, but they're 2 miles away, fighting through New Year's traffic. And then the countdown starts on the monitors. 10, 9, 8. The city outside is erupting. People are cheering. The shot spotter goes insane. 100 rounds detected in 5 seconds. Suddenly, line 2 rings. A massive pileup on the I-95. A drunk driver going the wrong way hit a family head on. There's fire, the caller is screaming. The car is upside down and I can hear children screaming. You're trying to keep the silent call units updated while you're flipping to the mass casualty protocol for the highway. You need fire. You need 3 ambulances. You need heavy rescue for the extrication. You're screaming into the radio, not with your voice, but with your focus. Dispatch to all units. Be advised we have a signal 100 on the interstate. Multiple injuries, vehicle fire. And then the radio from the silent call clicks. 2 Alpha 1-2 to dispatch. We're on scene. We have shots fired. Shots fired. Officer down. Requesting immediate backup. Your world collapses into a single point of light. One of your officers, a guy named Miller, who you just joked with in the break room 4 hours ago, is lying in a hallway bleeding out. The caller is probably dead. The highway is a graveyard, and the clock just hit 12:01. Happy New Year. You don't have time to process it. You can't cry, you can't scream, you have to be the anchor. You coordinate the perimeter for the shooter. You guide the life flight helicopter to the highway. You manage the chaos with a surgical precision that would make a trauma surgeon blush. For 45 minutes, you are the conductor of a symphony of sirens and survival. You don't stop until the shooter is in custody and the last victim is pulled from the wreckage. By 2 a.m., the adrenaline finally starts to ebb, leaving behind a cold, hollow exhaustion. You look at your hands. They're shaking. Your coffee is ice cold. You look at your partner at the next console. He just hung up on a call about a stolen bicycle. The world has returned to its baseline level of stupidity. You take off your headset. Your ears are ringing. You walk out of the center at 7 a.m. The sun is coming over a city that has no idea how close it came to the edge. You see people heading home from after parties, looking tired but happy. They don't see the dark circles under your eyes. They don't smell the stress on your skin. You get into your car, drive home in silence, and sit on the edge of your bed. You've just spent 12 hours in the heart of the storm. You saved 3 lives, you lost 2, and you watched a city try to eat itself alive. You won't sleep well today. You'll hear the beep of the incoming call in your dreams. But you'll be back tomorrow night because someone has to pick up the phone, and someone has to be the one who doesn't hang up. That's what it's like to be a 911 dispatcher. Welcome to the graveyard shift. Now go get some coffee. You're gonna need it.